All right. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Today is the fifth and final webinar as part of the Fall 2015 Watercraft Inspection Steward Program webinar series. My name is Brittany Rogers, and I'm from New York Sea Grant. I'm going to be the host again today. Bear with me this morning. Unfortunately, I've gotten a little sick due to the changing of the seasons. The 70-degree days to the 40-degree days has kind of gotten to me. But I'm here nonetheless, so we're going to keep moving forward anyway. We will only have one presentation today, and it is with Dave White on watercraft inspection legislation and regulations. I wanted to take the time to all of you who could join us today for being understanding in the change and the addition of the fifth webinar. This webinar is going to be a little bit more unique than the past ones, again, because this one is more of a conversation or a discussion, and we're giving you guys a chance to have a voice to speak up and ask any questions that you might have regarding legislation or regulations, especially here in New York. The presentation itself is going to be rather short because we want to make sure that you guys have time to ask questions and kind of move forward with conversations. I do ask, for those of you who are with us this morning, if you can private message me if you have a watercraft inspection steward program. Just take a moment in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen, send a private message to myself, Brittany Rogers, the host, and let me know that you do have a program currently in existence. Sometime throughout the session, just say where the program is located and who the organization is that runs it. I'm trying to collect information on what programs are currently out there, so that would be very helpful for me. Before we move forward to the presentation with Dave, I do have a couple of housekeeping items I want to cover quickly. If you guys have been in the webinar series prior to this, you've heard it all before, but I just have to make sure everybody's on the same page. So today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on demand on New York Sea Grant's website and YouTube channel. The last webinars should be uploaded before the end of the week. So everything should be up there. And I will be sending a follow-up email with a link to where you will find that stuff. When you leave the meeting this morning, this is going to be a little bit different. When you close out the webinar itself, a screen is going to pop up on your computer. And that is called Qualtrics, or it's through Cornell University, so it's a red and gray window. That's actually the evaluation. So if you could just take a moment to fill that out quickly when you're completed, or when the webinar is completed, that would be really useful for us. It only takes about 2 minutes. There's not a lot of questions, just quick and easy. You click answers, and if you want to type in some responses, that's really useful for me. So I'm using the results of these evaluations to kind of shape the workshop that we'll be hosting this spring. So depending on what you guys want and what you guys need is what we're going to have at our workshop in the spring. Right now, I do have everybody on mute to avoid all the background noises that can happen when on webinars, but if you do have a question, if you look over to the right-hand side of your screen, there should be a little hand-shaped button that you can click on, so go ahead and click on that to raise your hand if you have a question at any point throughout this presentation. As we're starting to go through the conversation part, I will unmute you so you can ask your question. Or if you would prefer to send it in a chat, please send it in the chat to everybody so that everyone can see what the question is and we can kind of go over it together. I would like to begin now by introducing today's presenter, Dave White. Dave has been with New York Sea Grant since November of 1984, and he is located at the State University of New York at New York College at Oswego. He has his master's degree in resource management from SUNY ESF. He has a bachelor's degree in agriculture and education from Cornell University, and he also has his associate's degree in natural resources conservation from SUNY Morrisville. He has developed educational programs focusing on recreation and tourism development and also youth along New York's Great Lakes.
Thank you, Brittany. And good morning, everyone. Britt, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
All righty. Thank you very much. As Brittany said, my name is Dave White, and I'm the Recreation Specialist with New York Sea Grant. And the topic of today to some might be somewhat unique as we talk about legislation and regulation, but for those that, work, manage, or participate in stewardship programs, you are, and your folks are, some of the leading educators when it comes to invasive species management and understanding with our boating public. As a recreation specialist, I work directly with the boating public and industry through the Coast Guard Auxiliary, Power Squadron, and the Marine Trades Associations across New York. And today we're going to be predominantly focusing on New York regulations and issues, but they really have relevance across the country because what's happened in New York is very similar to what a lot of states have put forward and developed as part of their program as well. These are just some notes for folks to be looking at, so this will make it relatively easy for folks. So the one thing when we start talking about legislation and regulation, and I'm just going to spend a few minutes with folks talking about some of the opportunities that are out there, and so folks are aware of them as educators. And the exciting thing, at least in New York and I think across the country, is most of the legislation and regulation that has been developed is truly based on, the international and national Stop Aquatic Hitchhiker Best Management Program of Clean, Drain, Dry. So the real important thing is even when we talk about legislation and regulation, it's really reinforcing that solid educational component as we try to work with the boating public, and be it a boater or those that are helping to manage and regulate boating, to really focus on the same issue. So, we're part of that Stop the Invasion in New York, and obviously Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers, the national program, reinforcing nationwide the same concept. So I think that's a really critical piece, that as we talk legislation and regulation, it's really how are some of those being put forward. There are several legislative and regulatory components in New York that are in place, and I think they become important for stewards to know so they can help educate boaters about them, because until new legislation is finally enacted, and I have an update on that, there's a variety of components in New York that will help educate and we can share with folks. I'm not going to give you the details on specific legislation, but give you what they focus on, because as one would know, legislation can change, the regulations that implement those legislation can change. So, these are pieces that you need to be aware of, that prior to the start of the next season, you can re-Google and say, are there any changes? Are there updates that my stewards would need to know about to help educate the boating public about? The first one is, and these are probably repetitive for folks, but I did want to go down through the list. The first one is obviously the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation has their boat launch regulations, which mimic, if you look a little farther down, the New York State DEC boat launch regulations. In both of those cases, boat launches that are operated and managed by either parks or DEC, be they, trailer boat, hard top, carry in, whatever they may be, have specific regulations on them that you cannot bring visible invasive species or other plant and animal product on any vessel, trailer, etc. coming into the launch, nor can you take it out of the launch. So it really, at their specific properties at this point in time, they're really, trying to take the clean, drain, dry, and with their specific properties say, from a legislative regulatory standpoint, we really, that's now a focal point at those specific managed properties. If it's a private launch, they're not covered by that regulation. If it's a locally town or other municipality, unless the local municipality has local rules for its jurisdiction, those don't come into play, but it's all the same rules and regulations that you would see in the clean, drain, dry, best management practices of removing product, making sure that you've drained all the water, etc. So right now, for those specific types, and again, I think that becomes important for stewards to know in those managing programs, so you can share that information, that regardless of where you are, you should be implementing these practices. But also, if someone is to ask a steward, well, I'm in a DEC one today, I'm going to a private one tomorrow, is there a difference? The answer is yes, legislatively there is, but programmatically there is not. So there really is an educable moment to help people understand that. And these regulations are very similar to what we see across the country in other states at launch ramps there. So it's really reinforcing the, the International Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers campaign across the country, and reinforcing it as boaters cross state lines and even international lines as well. The next piece that is there is the DEC Watercraft Transport Permit, that if someone's participating in an activity or is going to be transporting anything live in a live well or taking it through a tournament, they have to have a special permit. A lot of tournament organizers are working with the state to get a blanket permit that if they're participating in a tournament, but if not, if someone is going to transport anything to or from a New York DEC or Parks launch ramp, they need to have the Watercraft transport permit. It's very easy to do. It's available online, and many of you will be working with those that are operating and managing tournaments across the state, and it's a great opportunity for tournament organizers to get involved through the education process in partnership with the stewards to make sure that folks understand that if they are coming to or from the launch ramp, they need to have this permit. But again, it's that true educable moment to say this is just good practice, that no matter where you are, whether you need the transport permit or not, you really need to be cognizant of taking anything out of one body of water and going any place else in the state. And tournament organizers, I think, are becoming a real partner with many of us in the education mode, be it Bass or others, because they really want to be a part of this and making sure their participants are not transporting invasive species. So if you haven't worked with your local tournament organizers, be they local, regional, state, or national, it's a real opportunity to bring that element of the boating public, which many times is coming from out of state, to help reinforce some of these issues and initiatives. The next one we already talked about is the boat launch regulations at DEC website. And also DEC, as part of a legislative mandate, has developed universal signage, which is just exceptional. And we're really beginning to see a lot of non-DEC and parks, launch ramps, and others go online and print out those signs, whether they're just having them laminated or manufactured, but to, again, really reinforce the message, whether they're at a marina, they're at a private boat launch ramp, they're at a yacht club, wherever they may be, that universal signage really just reinforces those good best management practices. And you can go right on DEC website, you can get to it through the Parks website, which both are just exceptional with the kind of information they're presenting. So it's very easy to folks to go online, download it, get it manufactured, printed, however they may do it, to have it posted on their bulletin board. And I know that's one of the things the marine trade industry is working with a lot of its marinas across upstate New York and including downstate to utilize that signage to make sure it's consistent message that a boater, no matter where they go throughout the system, is seeing that kind of information available. Again, it all focuses off of the Clean, Drain, Dry Best Management Program, which I think becomes critically important for all of us when we talk about aquatic invasive species. There are local laws. Many folks are well aware of the Lake George specific control program that they have put into place, but there's many other jurisdictions that have talked about putting laws into place. In some cases, they have put them forward. So depending on where your stewards are going to be operating, you definitely want to communicate with the local municipality to make sure, are there any specific regulations that your stewards need to be aware of beyond what the state currently has, so that they're, again, helping educate the boater that, again, it might be a regulation specific to that body of water or to that region, but again, because they're all based on the same basic principles, it's almost another tool to help educate the boater to say, well, here in Lake George, this is what the protocol and the program is, but this just makes great sense statewide, even if it's not a regulation. So it's really an opportunity to take this. I think many times when folks have done this, the boaters feel that they're being helped to better understand legislation or regulation, but they don't have to see it as a hindrance because they're all based on those same good principles. But those stewards can really be helping us move it forward so that a boater doesn't get caught, between a crossfire of depending on what property I'm at, what is the regulation there. Really, you just can bring it back to that true educable moment. The last one I'll spend a few moments on is the Aquatic Invasive Species Spread Prevention Law that we talked about last year at the Lakes Association meeting. It is the systemic law across the state that basically takes clean, drain, dry as an educational concept and codifies it in law. That law took effect on September 2nd of 2015, but DEC has been going through an extensive process in working with the boating community and the marine trades community to come out with the specific regulations that will be in support of that law. Actually, I got a phone call this morning from Leslie. She and I have been playing phone tag, and she wanted me to know and wanted me to announce today to the folks here is December 16 As a target date, it appears those draft regulations will be put forward for public comment. So it really becomes an opportunity for all of you folks, and we can begin to share that information over the next week or two so that folks can begin to look at what those regulations are going to be. How will they impact your steward program, what you might want to be thinking about on how your stewards can become real educators of what that law will be based on the regulations that are going to be promulgated and move forward, which obviously will now really come to bear come next season. So the timing is really well. I'm very excited that we now have time to have folks look at those regulations, because your folks are on the front line and we're coming off the season with evaluations you've done. I think, Leslie and Phil and Ed and the folks in DEC are really going to be looking for any comments you can provide as to, this is what our stewards heard from boaters, this is what our stewards saw at various boat launch ramps. These were the issues that we were hearing. How can the regulation make sure it encompasses them? How can the regulation be sure that, when it's implemented, it's going to be implemented in a way that becomes very practical for all of us to carry forward? Because the real focus here is education. The real focus is helping to identify and codify those specific pieces that we all want to carry forward. And to have a statewide law will really, I think, become very helpful for all steward programs, because many of you work in multiple jurisdictions. And obviously, boaters don't necessarily stay in one of those jurisdictions. So, someone goes from the Finger Lakes to the Adirondacks. When they're hearing that same message and they're seeing that same signage, it really elevates the opportunity to educate. And when your stewards have this information in their pocket, they can just let people know to say, hey, when you go to this area, this is what you're going to have to deal with. But it's still at that very basic clean, drain, dry. And to have the state now move forward with those regulations as to what do those specifically mean for all of us, I think it'll become really helpful. It'll become really helpful to boaters, and it becomes really helpful to those that are using the boat as a tool for other mechanisms, be it fishing, diving, whatever that may be. So that's kind of an overview of where the state is. Those laws, regulations are pretty systemic across the Northeast and across the country. Obviously, some states have enhanced rules and regulations where they're actually checking boats at the border. They've carried it steps farther because of their desire to try to really restrict species coming into their states. But again, the message that we're carrying forward with clean, drain, dry, and then through the regulatory process that will be upcoming, that now will carry it statewide, I think really provides the stewards with an opportunity and another tool to use when talking with boaters to help enhance compliance, to help enhance education, and to really raise awareness as we talk about not only boaters, but the folks that are using the boat as a tool to do another activity that many times don't even think of themselves as a boater. So, with that, Britt, I'm going to turn it back to you with that overview, and be happy to answer questions, get into a discussion with folks about, how some of these might impact their steward program, what the opportunities are, what folks heard. But I think the real opportunity we have going forward is with the regulation draft about to come out in a week or so, really provides a great opportunity for steward and steward programs to get involved.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dave, for that introduction on the regulation. I did get a couple questions during your presentation. And again, if people have questions, raise their hand. I will go through and unmute you as we go through. 1 second. Okay, so the first question is from James. With regards to the transport permit, does it specifically apply to fish and bait fish transport, or does it extend to aquatic vegetation?
Absolutely. The watercraft transport permit is required if you're going to transport a watercraft that has not been drained or cleaned of visible attached plant and animal material. So, if there's a reason that you're moving it, and I'll give you a great example. One of the issues is several marinas will take a boat from a boat launch ramp to their facility to physically clean, power wash it and clean it to put it away for the winter. So, they're going to take the boat right out of the launch ramp. They're going to drive down the street 200 feet and take it to their facility. To do that, they need a blanket permit as a marine business to do that because they're transporting it, but they're not going to another body of water. They're taking it to a facility that's specifically designed to clean that boat. So they need to get a permit. Other people that, if you are obviously transporting any plant material, even if it's not invasive, that you're utilizing for any purpose, including education purpose, you need a permit. So if you have that live, those are the kind of things that they're looking for someone to get a permit for. And obviously, if you're participating in a tournament where you have to transport live fish by rule of the tournament so they can be released after, you need to have a permit for that. So if the tournament organizer is not providing it, everyone participating in the tournament needs to have that. And basically, it's a self-check. You go online, you fill in the form, you print out the form, and you have it on board so that if you're stopped, you can show to someone, I'm participating in this derby, I'm going from point A to point B. So that's what it's there to help prevent. And it's not specific to invasive species because, as we all know, many of us might even have a hard time very quickly identifying an invasive species. So it's really focused on any living plant and animal material that you're going to transport from point A to point B.
Awesome, thank you. The next question that we have was also provided in the chat box. And it is, what is the best thing a steward can do when working at, for example, in New York, a DEC launch or state parks launch site, and the boater refuses to do a watercraft inspection?
I think that really boils down to who is managing the steward program and what their ability to go beyond education on specific clean, drain, dry, I'm here to help you. I know a lot of folks, what they have talked about is to, as we've all done, if a boater says, no, I don't want your help, I'm not going to do that. Obviously, in a voluntary program, you then step away, say thank you very much. I think what a lot of folks have talked about doing is at that point saying, thank you very much, I appreciate your interest. I think this is where it comes specific to the stewardship program. Many of them are then utilizing the state brochure that DEC and parks put together that specifically states their regulations, that a person could have that to say, just so you are aware, you are at a state facility, and here is the regulation for this boat launch ramp. I don't think they need to go any farther than that. They already have a boater that has said they don't want to participate, but I think that then gets them to the point of being a true educator to say, I just want to inform you that this facility has additional regulation, and here's the flyer. It's a joint DEC and Parks flyer that they developed that, again, says this is the regulation. You have to clean all visible material, drain your boat. If they then opt not to and they leave, is an educational program, and as stewards, their job is done. They might feel bad, but they've done all they can to educate that boater that if you don't want me to help you do it, in this specific facility, you do need to do that. And that's where that comes into play of if they're a steward at a DEC or boat launch ramp, they would want to have that. If they're at another facility, it then ends at that point, obviously, as it always has, of, okay, as a voluntary program, they've said no, they're not obligated at this point until the new law takes effect, which will include the variety of facilities across the state.
Great. I do also have Megan Phillips on the line. She is from New York State Parks. She is in charge of the boat steward program for the state parks. And Megan, I'm going to unmute you. Megan, are you here?
Yes.
Oh, if you want to expand on that, is there any instances that your stewards have had people who refuse inspection?
Yes, our data from 2014 and 2015 shows that on the average about 6% of boaters will decline inspection as a part of our program. And like Dave said, since it is a voluntary program, we don't hold our stewards responsible for telling people that they can't launch if they refuse to be inspected. We do give our stewards phone numbers for the local park police officers. So if they happen to see somebody launching who didn't want inspection but had plant or animal material attached to their boat, we would recommend that they take down that license plate number and contact the park police so that they can deal with it on the regulatory level. Those stewards, of course, are not regulatory agents, and they're not authorized to write tickets or anything like that.
Great, thank you.
Megan, if we can continue that, because I think that's where some non-state agency steward programs, I think that's an interesting question, and that's where I always say, it's truly up to who's managing the program. In your case, your employees are truly state park employees, and they're obligated for many things as a state park employee to
Right.
then do that go beyond, say, a lake association steward What, you know, in your experience in working with your stewards, can you provide any thoughts to, you know, let's say a lake association that may be doing a steward program? Do you think that's something that their stewards should take that next step of writing down a license plate or making a phone call, or do you think it's best for them to stop at the point where they've given out your brochure that says, this is a state law, if you opt not to comply with it, it's out of my hands? I get that question, and sometimes I'm just not really sure how to reply as well.
Well, I think with any steward program, first and foremost, we're concerned with the steward's safety. In our program, our stewards are always by themselves at boat launches, and we don't want to escalate any interaction with the boater to the point where it's confrontational. And trying to lay down the law, so to speak, is one situation where people could get upset. So I guess if a lake association was manning a state-owned boat launch and had a situation where somebody declined inspection and there was plant or animal material on the vessel, that would be a tough call, you know, because I would be hesitant to tell stewards, hey, no matter what, you have to record their information and call someone, because that might make the steward feel uncomfortable or unsafe, and that's the last thing that you want. So I guess I would leave it up to the steward's discretion at that point and say, if you're comfortable making this call, or if you feel threatened in any way, just leave the launch. You know, it's not worth. It's just not worth getting in a public argument over it. And part of the reason that these programs work is because we're not pushy. You know, it's an education program. We want people to be accepting of it, and we want people to cooperate. And I think having that education approach rather than the regulatory approach is really the only way that we can be successful in doing that. So does that answer your question, Dave? Yeah.
And if anyone else that's out there wants to chime in that does run like a non-public entity program, if you will, either a lake association or something of that, I'd be curious to their, because that's where this issue will come up when you try to really bridge that education role, the protection of them, because so many of them are college students, they're still learning through the process. So if anybody else had experience with that, I'd be interested to hear as we share this, over the next few months.
Yeah, me too. I'd be interested in hearing from the Lake Association folks.
Yeah.
I do have another question. I'm not sure if it's regarding the same question, but I'm going to unmute Karen. Karen, are you here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
All right. I'm with the Black Lake Association, and we are trying to form a steward program. We did work this past summer with Megan and people from Parks because they have jurisdiction over our launch. But one of the things that we did share with boaters was the fine that they might be subject to, if they are caught with any matter on their boat. So that might be something that could be added, not in a threatening way, but in educational format.
Did folks, that's really interesting, Karen. So did folks then react to that to say, oh, thank you, or I appreciate your help, or did they just say thanks and still walk away? Did your stewards give you an indication of reaction from boaters?
It was more a discussion that we had with those who let us do the inspection, because I wasn't personally involved with, we had a few decline, and I wasn't personally involved with them, so I'm not sure that was discussed with those, but it might be something that could be added.
Interesting. Thank you.
That's a good point, Karen, because, it really makes the steward sound like we're looking out for not only the best interests of the lake and other surrounding water bodies, but also the boater, to protect them from potentially incurring a fine if they didn't fully understand and comply with the regulation.
Right.
Megan, I didn't check online, but is your guys' brochure, the one that's gotten big red letters, attention boaters, that specifically talks about the regs, is that online for people to download?
I just checked before this webinar, and unfortunately it still is not. However, okay. Brittany has made it available on the Sea Grant website, I believe.
Okay.
So anyone who is listening in today There'll be a follow-up email, I believe, with a link to any handouts that presenters had over the course of the webinar series. Is that correct, Britt?
Yep. So that handout that Dave and Megan are talking about with the, it's a quick rundown of the regulations. That is a PDF that will be uploaded, and it's free for download. It will be on the Sea Grant website with all of the presentations and the recordings of the webinars. I do have another question or another hand raised from Peter. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Peter, are you here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm associated with the Paradox Lake Association. We've had a steward program in place developing for about 5 years now. We operate on a DEC facility at the campground boat launch on Paradox Lake. We do primarily the boat inspections and do education at that point, but we also have no problem making phone calls to rangers or DEC enforcement people. We also, if we find boaters coming in that have material that needs to be dealt with, we also provide the boater with a list of the 3 closest decontamination stations and recommend that they go get processed and then come back to enjoy the lake. We've had a couple instances where we've actually made phone calls, and usually when that happens, the way that our program works is the steward also contacts some adult in the Lake Association, and that person goes down and joins the steward in case there's any questions. We do have support from the staff at the campground, the DEC staff, so it's not like we're hanging out there cracking the whip on a boater by ourselves. But that's kind of been the focus of our program. We are adding a light enforcement component to our education program.
But that's an interesting one, but you make sure then that you have a, quote-unquote adult supervisor on call that steward can call as well as the call to report it.
Yes, although primarily it's the DEC people that are there during their shifts if an adult is needed. We have the support of the campground supervisor with no problem. They've been very good.
Okay. So DEC in that case, although they're not obviously enforcement officers as well, their staff are willing to assist and come over and support on the we're going to report you side with your stewards. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter, for joining in on that. If anybody else has questions regarding that or comments regarding that, go ahead, raise your hand or submit questions through the chat box on the right-hand side. Until then, I will probably move forward to another question that I had submitted. So the next question is it's regarding decontamination. So it says that in other states, decontamination is required, and possibly at Lake George it's required. They have to have stickers on the boats or some kind of tags for proof of their watercraft inspection. Do we foresee New York State doing this in the future? Has this been something that was talked about?
Currently, the Lake George program in New York is the only one doing that. Obviously, there is an escalated cost in doing that, in providing the both the facility and the staff to put that in place. It's being looked at in other areas. They're providing it in other areas. There's several base designs to do that, including those that don't have access to water and electricity. There's full systems that have been designed, that are available online that you can look at. It really boils down in many, many cases to a cost basis on the ability to do that. I think the discussion, it continues, it has. I think as folks look at the new regulations that are going to be drafted, I think that's one of the things that has been talked about as they've been looking at those is to, if a boater comes to a location and does not have the ability to decontaminate, and the regulations really are looking at, more the visual side in that, what are we going to be able to provide to them in order to do that is an ongoing question that's being discussed. But in each individual jurisdiction has to look at that on what their ability is. I know what a lot of folks do is they have a list of where are all the car washes, and they'll say to folks, hey, before you come in, I know in other states they've even gone as far as to get car wash discounts that they'll hand to people and say, hey, a mile down the road is a car wash, here's a $1 off coupon, we'd love to have you go down there and really, decontaminate your boat and trailer to make sure everything is out of it. So it's actually bringing the business community to the table, and actually a lot of marinas have also looked at, is that a business opportunity that they could be looking at in partnership with lake associations and others to say, we already have all the equipment, is there an opportunity for a marina to work with a boat launch ramp or with a steward group to do the decontamination at that point, either for cost or as part of a granting program? So there's several options that are being looked at out there. I get excited when I hear those that the business community wants to partner, because it brings in other folks that are involved in this, be it a car wash, a marina, or others that are looking to do this in support of the program, but also as a business, because that's just going to help get the message out further into more folks.
Great, thank you, Dave. So another question that just came in. Okay, so do disposal stations for aquatic invasive species need to be installed at boat launches participating in the Steward program? And what should be done with aquatic invasive species found on boats if no station is available?
Excellent question. Multiple answers, and you're hearing in both my comments, Megan's, and others that people are making is, this is still an evolving process when it comes to this. And I'd ask Megan to correct me, but I've seen nothing yet. Again, we're now awaiting the final regulations to come out in proposed draft for the new law. But to this point, you're not required to have a disposal station at a facility. On the DEC, at least I know on the DEC website, possibly on parks, the design is there. So if the Steward program wants to build one, all the design parameters there as to how to do it. Those that don't have a disposal station available are basically disposing of it upland in either a weeded grass area to get the material away from the lake so that it's not going in, especially if there's issue of a boat coming in. Obviously, the disposal stations are nothing more than a composting bin, if you will, for aquatic plant and animals that are being put in that. So, short of that, a confined area where you're not going to have runoff into the body of water is what I think a lot of folks have been doing. In some cases, they are bagging and removing, depending, again, on the program and how far they want to go with it. But in most regard, if there's not a disposal station, they basically kind of created an area that they know is a secure area that plant and animal product won't get into the body of water. Megan, have you seen anything different or heard anything different?
Let's see. I don't believe that there's any requirement yet for the disposal stations to be built at parks facilities. We did make that option available in all of our regions, and not all park managers were interested in having those constructed, some of the reasons being that people use them as a trash can if it's a carry-in, carry-out facility. But at the sites where they are available, people have been using them, especially at Black Lake, and I think Karen Winters can attest to that. But if they don't have those types of facilities available, what we have stewards do is just have a 5-gallon bucket and put a trash bag inside of it and collect the material that way. And then if you just tie off the bag at the end of the day and put it in a dumpster somewhere, it will desiccate eventually, or you could compost that material as well, as long as it's in an upland location where there's no risk of contamination. Let's see. We do have a relatively simple design for our AIS disposal station, and I'd be happy to share that with anyone who's interested. Perhaps I could just send it along to Brittany, and she could add it to the Sea Grant web materials.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be great. If you want to go ahead and email me that. So another question that came forward was, are there suggestions for how to train stewards or educate the stewards about these laws and regulations to make sure that they understand them better so they can relay the proper messages to the boaters?
Again, it goes to, and our studies want to know a recording depending on who's managing the program and what property you're on. I think, you know, if you haven't seen it, when you do see it on the website, the brochure that DEC and Parks have put together is very direct, very easy to understand, and I think folks that have used that have found it to be a very helpful match for the Clean, Drain, Dry brochure, so that if they are at currently a state facility, both DEC or Parks, you know, the laws are systemic, and it's basically the same, is thou shalt not bring a boat in with, and thou shalt not leave with a boat with anything animal or plant visible on it, or anything in the bait, live well, etc. That's a great brochure to have because it's just very general and direct, and it says, you know, at this facility, these are the regulations that you need to comply with. You know, from a steward themselves, I don't think they need to know a whole lot more about that at this point in time, but it goes to making sure they understand, because in many cases, you know, some steward programs, they may not realize what kind of facility they are at. Is it, you know, a state facility? Is it a park? Is it a DEC? Is it a county facility? My understanding is these are currently directed at DEC and parks operated and managed facilities. I've asked a question, and I'm not sure I've gotten full clarification. And again, Megan, I throw it to you if you've heard anything different. But a local municipality that is running a launch ramp on behalf of, but they're the operator of it, I haven't heard clarification on if they have to comply. My suggestion to them was to say, yes, it is because they're on state property. And it just gives them the protection in case somebody comes back or whatever. So I've taken it even to the step that, you know, for example, you know, if a town has a town launch, but they're doing it on behalf of DEC for fishing access, I've always encouraged them to say it's required there because I don't think it hurts them to say that. They may not ever want to take the step of reporting it in case there was a question, but I've always said to them, I don't think it's a far stretch to say because they're managing it on behalf of. But that flyer becomes a really nice piece just to help educate boaters, and again, as educational stewards, and then they can walk away from it and follow any other protocols either on reporting or ignoring, depending on what it is. But that's a really good piece for stewards to have because it gets them out of that regulatory mode, and they're really just providing another brochure of education along with the Clean, Drain, Dry piece that they would normally hand to a boater.
If I could add to that, I believe that you're correct, Dave, that it doesn't matter who's operating the facility, whether or not they're subject to the regulations lies in who owns the facility. But also, Brittany can also pass this along, that we have a 2-page PDF that accompanies the Attention Boaters RAC card, which explains the regulation. And this 2-page PDF is frequently asked questions about the regulation to help boaters interpret the regulation, even though it's pretty simple, but there are some questions that come about. For example, does the regulation apply to non-motorized watercraft, such as canoes and kayaks? The answer is yes. You know, where should I drain my watercraft if I come to the launch and there's still water in the bilge? And other questions of that nature. So that will also be available for download on the Sea Grant website and could be an easy 2-page thing to print out to hand out to boaters in addition to the RAC card.
Yeah, so that will also be on the website for the webinar series, and those PDFs should be available within the following week or so. In the chat box, we did get a link from Dick McDonald. He sent the link to the designs and information regarding the invasive species disposal station. Another question came about was, where is the best way to find this regulation info, and do we know if it's updated frequently? I did, quick before Dave, before you get answering, I did look up online and I found DEC's website, which I'm going to share the link to that website in the chat section. Dave, if you know anywhere else that regulations can be found, if you want to share that as well.
Yeah, and you know, and kudos to Megan and the folks at the DEC Invasive Species Office and in the Fish and Wildlife Bureau, obviously, as well as to Cornell, because I think those 3 websites, the Parks website, the DEC website, and Cornell's, actually the Invasive Species NIAS website, all provide this information in a great way with downloadable PDFs, with downloadable flyers and signs. The issue does come into play that many of us don't have the resources to produce thousands of them to give to any group, but it's really nice that you can really go online and say, hey, there's the sign, you can print it, you can laminate it, you can put it on a bulletin board. So in all those cases, that information is readily available. One of the reasons I didn't put all the links to the laws and everything in the short presentation I gave is those can break and those can change. So actually, if you go into your favorite search, be it Yahoo or Chrome or Google, whatever your search engine is, if you type in, New York State, DEC, Aquatic Invasive Species Regulations, it'll take you right to it, within the top 5. If you do the same for parks, it'll take you right to it. If you type in New York State DEC Watercraft Transport, it'll take you right to and give you those pages where that information is. Those are the official state pages. They are updated. Obviously, as regulations change, those are updated. I don't see a lot of change coming to those. Obviously, the big change will be December 12th. And public record when the draft regulations come out, and they'll obviously also be on the DEC website. So again, very easy, later this month, if you want to see what those draft regulations are in support of the September implementation of that law, very quick and easy to, do a search online and find those available. And I think that's something that as you prepare for next season, it's something you may want to do, and, again, because we're all part of the network, is to, check through Brittany, who can provide a lot of that assistance, is to, and Brittany will be up on top of it to say, have any regulations changed? And I think the big one will be the implementation of the new law that will come into effect. It is in effect, but the regulations will come into effect prior to the next season, because that law is designed to be statewide in nature. So that's going to be the big piece, and I think it's just a great opportunity that DEC has announced that that's coming out, so folks can be engaged in that discussion, but also you'll be well prepared to say, what is the law of the land going to be come next March when people start to launch boats?
Great, thank you again, Dave. Another question came in. If anybody else has questions, we are going to start wrapping up. So please go ahead and either raise your hand on the right-hand side of the screen, that little button, or submit your question in the Q&A. Also, so the last question that I have right now is, in Pennsylvania, the waters are theoretically the property of the Commonwealth. Would this argument apply to aquatic invasive species released in waters of New York as well?
Not quite sure where that's going. I'll give an answer, and then obviously if she wants to provide, an additional question on that. In New York, unless it is a private lake or property, it is bottomland and owned by the state of New York as navigable water and is guided and governed by state law and then local jurisdiction as well as a home rule state. And that's where you can have home rule and additional set of regulations either by body of water, by county, by town, whatever legal jurisdiction there is, as long as home rule goes farther than state law essentially in New York. So the two current laws that we have obviously are specific to the action of launching and retrieving a vessel at specific state properties. The new law that will take effect will govern the launching of vessels across the state, as well as, and I point this out because if folks haven't seen the new law also takes into account floating docks and other floating products that will also fall under the new law. And that was included in the law because there was actually a floating raft or dock that was being transported from one body of water to another that when it was stopped was found to have invasive species on it. So the law goes beyond, the new law goes beyond vessels and does include the transport and removal of floating docks and platforms.
We haven't gotten any more questions submitted, so I'm going to go ahead and we can start closing up. If we get any questions while I'm doing this, we can answer those. So thanks again, Dave, and also thank you, Megan, for joining us this morning and participating in the webinar and answering some of the questions that came across as well. Again, Dave, if you could please repeat that date that you mentioned earlier from Leslie about the regulations being released for public comments, and do you know how they're going to be released?
Yeah, I really appreciated Leslie giving me that call because that is new information as of yesterday and today, which is very exciting for folks to be able to now look at that. And you folks on the webinar today and others, I think, can really provide some great insight as to how effective it will be, how helpful it will be, how can it be how can we as educators help move that whole thing forward. That will be posted on DEC's website as well as in the state environmental, I think it's Environmental Reporter, the state, maybe Megan can help me there too. There is a state publication that lists all new regulation that's in draft form, but it will also be on the DEC website. And again, you can pick your favorite search engine, and if you type in New York State DEC proposed regulation, it'll take you right to that page, and right on it will be the proposed draft regulation in support of that law. Traditionally, there's a 60-day comment period. I'm not sure if that will, if that is the case here, or if that will be extended or shorter. But there is a comment period for folks to provide comment. And many of you may be able to, talk directly with Leslie or to Phil or Ed, the three folks who have been predominantly involved in working with a lot of user groups to try to develop those regulations so they're going to be, useful and effective for limiting the transport of invasive species.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. So again, thanks, Dave. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know that this additional webinar a couple weeks after the other four was a little bit of a change, but I appreciate everyone who has joined us and asked questions today. It really helps us move forward with the conversation and make sure that we understand what people are asking, what they're interested in knowing. And also, again, when you guys close out the webinar today, a window will pop up, or you'll get a notification for a pop-up, and please fill out that evaluation that's on there. I'm asking for feedback on this session specifically, and if you have comments about other sessions as well, you can provide those then. Your insights to this session or to other sessions is really helpful for us, and it helps shape our future events that are happening. So this is the final session of the 5 webinars during the Fall 2015 webinar series. We will be hosting a day-long webinar, or a day-long workshop, excuse me, at the NYSFOLA conference in the spring, which is in the end of April. If you are interested in joining us for that workshop, go ahead and send me an email and I can put you on our list. We will be having more information for the public as it comes about as we move forward with the planning process. So I haven't had any other questions come through, so we're going to go ahead and finish up for today. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you at the workshop in the spring.
Great job, Brittany. Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany.